At Thanksgiving, my daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and said, "Get out of my house, old woman. You're a burden," while she flaunted their dinner like they were the happiest family in the world. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. I just stood up, walked to the guest room where I had been staying for almost 8 months, grabbed my small purse, and left. But before I closed the front door, I took the deed with me. The deed they didn't even know I still had. It had been a long year. After my husband Bill died, things changed faster than I could process. We'd been married for 43 years. He handled most of the financial matters, and I took care of the house, our boys, and everything else. When he passed in March, it felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. I stayed in the house for a few weeks, thinking I'd manage. But the loneliness hit harder than I expected. Michael, my only son, offered that I could move in with him and his wife, Trisha, just until you feel ready to be on your own again. That's what he said on the phone. I didn't pack much. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. Just a few clothes, medications, a photo album, and the original deed of our house, which I'd found in Bill's file cabinet. It still had both our names on it, and for some reason, I slipped it in the side pocket of my purse. At first, I thought Trisha was just adjusting to having me around. She wasn't warm, but she wasn't cruel either. I stayed in the spare bedroom. Trisha called it the craft room before I moved in. She cleared a small space in the closet, told me to use one shelf in the bathroom cabinet, and asked me not to use the washer after 5 p.m. In April, I cooked dinner a few times a week. By May, I was told they'd prefer if I didn't interfere with the routine. In June, they disconnected the landline phone I'd been using. In July, Trisha removed my name from the shared Wi-Fi. By August, I wasn't allowed to have visitors in the house without checking with her. I kept telling myself, it's temporary, be grateful, they're helping you. Michael was always too busy, always in meetings, always on a call, always, "Can we talk later, Mom?" I watched him avoid my eyes more and more each week. Then November came. Thanksgiving had always been my holiday. Every year, Bill and I hosted. I cooked the turkey. I made the sweet potato casserole with the mini marshmallows on top. My sisters came, my nieces came, even Michael's friends would show up with their kids. It was the only time the house felt full in the way that made your heart feel safe. This year, Trisha said she would take care of Thanksgiving. She didn't ask me to help cook. She didn't ask for my recipes. She didn't even mention it until the Tuesday before. "You'll eat early, before the guests arrive," she said, standing in the kitchen in her slippers, sipping her protein smoothie. "What?" I asked, honestly confused. "It's just easier that way," she continued, not looking up from her phone. "We're doing a curated dinner experience. I have a chef coming, and a table layout planned. You'll have your meal around 4. They'll arrive at 6. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Michael wasn't in the room, and even if he had been, he probably would have just nodded along. That's what he did now. On Thanksgiving Day, I stayed in my room. Most of the morning, I watched the Macy's parade on the little TV they let me keep in the corner. I could hear Trisha moving around outside the room, giving directions to someone about where the flower arrangements should go. At 3:30, she knocked on the door. "Your food is ready." I walked out and saw one small plate at the kitchen counter. Turkey, stuffing, no sweet potatoes, no cranberry sauce, just a scoop of something green the first couldn't identify. Trisha stood next to the fridge with her arms crossed. She didn't say, "Happy Thanksgiving." Michael wasn't there. He was picking up wine, she said. So I sat alone on a bar stool and ate silently while she opened cabinets and barked instructions into a Bluetooth headset. I finished my plate. She never looked at me. I washed my dish, dried it with a towel, and placed it back in the cabinet. I turned to go back to my room, but that's when it happened. She was on the phone with someone, loud enough for me to hear. "No, it's fine. I already told her. She ate hours ago. I'm not having her at the table. She's a burden." The words landed with a dull thud. Not shouted, not screamed, just calmly said, like she was discussing a misplaced napkin. She saw me standing there. "What?" she asked, voice sharp now. "Did you need something?" I shook my head. "Then go back to your room. We have guests coming, and I don't want you in the way." I went back to the room, sat on the edge of the bed for maybe 3 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything, actually. Just a kind of quiet hum in my chest. I stood up, opened the drawer, picked up my purse, zipped it shut, and walked out. Trisha was lighting candles in the dining room. She didn't look at me. Michael's car wasn't in the driveway yet. I passed the long table set for 12. White linen, gold-rimmed plates, name cards. I reached the front door, paused, unzipped the side pocket of my purse. There it was, folded neatly where I'd placed it 8 months ago. the deed to my house. I took it out, looked at it for a moment, and then slid it into the main compartment. I walked out, closed the door behind me, and left without a word. I didn't take the car, I walked. It was cold outside, but not freezing. The kind of cold that reminds you you're alive but also tells you to keep moving. Trisha and Michael's house wasn't far from where Bill and I used to live. They picked that area on purpose, years ago, so they could be close to help when their kids were small. Now that I was the one who could have used help, the closeness only made things more suffocating. It took me about 40 minutes on foot. I could have called someone for a ride, maybe Margie or even Linda from my old church, but I didn't want to talk. I didn't want anyone to ask me questions. I just wanted to go back to the only place that still felt like it belonged to me, even if it technically didn't anymore. When I got to the house, our house, nothing had changed on the outside. Same shutters, same mailbox that Bill used to curse at every winter because the snowplows always knocked it sideways. The lawn was overgrown, but not terribly. Michael had told me they were handling upkeep through a property management service. I doubted that was true now that I still had my key. I don't think Michael even remembered that. The lock turned like it always had. When I stepped inside, it smelled like dust and old carpet, but under that, I could still smell Bill's cologne, faintly, buried deep in the air, in the walls maybe. I stood in the foyer for a minute, my hand still on the doorknob. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't move. I just stood there in the dark, listening. I think I expected to feel something, like grief, but I didn't. Not yet. The house had been empty since March. After the funeral, everything happened so quickly. The paperwork, the calls, the decisions. I couldn't sleep in the bed without crying, so Michael had suggested staying with them for a bit, and I just went. Now I was back, but not as a visitor, not as someone escaping loneliness. I was back because I had nowhere else to go, and maybe also because I was done being polite about how people treated me. I went straight upstairs. The master bedroom was still ours. I had left it clean, sheets washed, curtains drawn. I walked in and turned on the lamp by the nightstand. The bed was made. The same blue comforter we'd picked out together the year he got sick. His slippers were still next to the dresser. My robe was still hanging on the back of the door. Nothing had been touched. I sat down slowly on my side of the bed and took the deed out of my purse. I unfolded it carefully. It had our names, not Michael's, not anyone else's, just mine and Bill's. There had been talk, after he died, about transferring it into Michael's name. For simplicity, they'd said, in case anything happens. But I'd never signed the final paperwork. I hadn't been ready. Now I was glad I hadn't. It hit me then. They thought I had nothing. Trisha, with her tight smiles and silent rules. Michael, with his busy schedule and quiet cowardice. They thought they were doing me a favor. They thought the house was already theirs, or soon would be. But it wasn't. I opened the bottom drawer of the nightstand. All the original folders were still there. Property taxes, insurance documents, the old appraisal Bill had done in 2015 when he thought we might refinance. Everything, all untouched. I pulled out the most recent documents and stacked them on the bed. The more I read, the clearer it became. The house had never been legally transferred. Michael had started the process, yes, but it was incomplete. The lawyer never filed it because the final deed hadn't been signed by me. Without that, the house remained part of my estate, entirely mine. It was close to 9 p.m. when I finally went downstairs to the kitchen. I hadn't eaten since that plate of dry turkey and mushy stuffing earlier. There wasn't much left in the pantry, but I found a box of instant oatmeal and a can of peaches. I heated them together in a pot and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Bill used to read the paper every morning, clicking his pen like it annoyed him. Halfway through eating, my cell phone buzzed. Michael. I let it ring, then Trisha, then Michael again. I turned the phone off. They had questions. I didn't know them answers. After I finished eating, I washed the pot and spoon. Old habits. I couldn't sleep in that room yet, so I grabbed an old quilt from the hall closet and lay down on the couch in the living room. My back ached. The heater rattled. The house creaked and moaned with the kind of familiar sounds I hadn't realized I missed. But I slept deeply. The next morning, I woke up early, like I always did, made coffee, sat in silence. At 8:15, there was a knock at the door. It was Michael. He looked tired, or maybe just angry. He was still in his dress pants, jacket half-zipped, no tie. Mom, he said as soon as I opened the door, what are you doing here? I live here, I answered plainly. Still do. He blinked. Trisha didn't mean, look, that wasn't okay, what she said. But just leaving like that? You had us worried. I didn't say anything. He stepped inside without waiting for permission. Walked straight to the kitchen like he still lived there. You took the deed, he said. Why? I followed him. Sat down at the table. Because it's mine. Come on, Mom, he said. You know we were in the process of putting it in our name. No, I interrupted. You were trying to put it in your name. I never signed it. He looked stunned. Why do you think I kept the originals? I added. I never agreed to give this house away. Your father left it to me, and I haven't changed that. Michael sat down across from me. I could see the calculations moving behind his eyes. Not sorrow, not guilt. Strategy. You're serious about this? Yes. He exhaled, long and slow. Okay. Okay. But what now? You're just moving back in? After everything? I never moved out, Michael. I was staying with you. Temporary. You said it yourself. He nodded slowly, and I could see him pulling back. I knew that look. It was the same one he gave teachers when they called home in high school. The same one he gave Bill when he crashed the car at 19. He was done pretending to care. Now he was figuring out how to spin this. Well, he finally said, standing up, I guess I'll let Trisha know. Let her know what? That you're back, and that we're going to need to talk about the house. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. As he walked out, I realized something else. He wasn't surprised that I left. He was surprised I left with the one thing they actually cared about, and they were about to find out just how much they'd underestimated me. Michael left without saying goodbye. He didn't slam the door or raise his voice. He just walked out like someone heading to a meeting they didn't want to attend. I sat at the kitchen table long after he was gone, sipping coffee that had gone cold. The house was quiet again. Too quiet, but it was mine. And after what happened on Thanksgiving, I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel like a guest in my own life again. Around 10 a.m., I made a phone call. Not to Michael, not to Trisha. I called Mr. Kramer, our old family attorney. He had handled the deed when Bill and I bought the house almost 3 decades ago. The last time I saw him was after the funeral. He had offered to help with the estate, but Michael had insisted on using someone else. More modern, he'd said. More efficient. But I remembered Mr. Kramer. He had white hair, slow hands, and a steady voice. He always asked how I was holding up, even when there was no legal reason to. When I called, he answered on the third ring. Ellen, he said, his voice still warm, like it had always been. You all right? I'd like to schedule an appointment, I said. Today, if possible. He didn't ask why, just gave me a time and told me to bring anything I had. At 1:30 p.m., I arrived at his office. Same place it had always been, across from the post office, next to that bakery Bill used to like. Mr. Kramer met me at the door himself. He walked a bit slower than I remembered, but his grip was still firm. I sat down across from him and pulled out the manila folder I'd brought with me. The original deed, the unsigned transfer documents, a copy of Bill's will, and the most recent property tax receipts, still in my name. I want to make sure this house is legally protected, I told him. No one else's name is on it, and I'd like to keep it that way. Mr. Kramer read through the documents quietly. Every few minutes he nodded or made a mark with his pen. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me. Everything's still clean, he said. You're the sole owner, Ellen. The transfer attempt from earlier this year wasn't completed. No record was filed with the county. Your signature's missing, and that means it's invalid. So there's no dispute? I asked. Legally, no. But that doesn't mean they won't try to stir up trouble. I nodded. They will. He tapped his pen on the edge of the desk. We can update your will, lock down the house as a non-transferable asset if you want, or we can create a trust. Make sure no one can mess with it while you're alive or after. Your call. I thought about it. About how Trisha had whispered that I was a burden. About how Michael hadn't even asked me how I felt after 8 months in his house. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. Set up the trust, I said. I wanted out of there. Reach. He didn't flinch. Just picked up a blank form and started filling it out. It took about an hour to go through everything. He explained what each section meant. He didn't rush me. When it was done, I signed the documents. He had them notarized before I even left the building. You want me to notify them? He asked. No, I said. They'll find out when they try. He nodded, then stood to walk me out. Back at the house, I reheated some leftover soup I found in the freezer. It was probably months old, but it was fine. I sat by the window in the living room and watched the wind blow leaves across the driveway. My phone was on the counter, still off. It buzzed once. Then again. I turned it over but didn't unlock it. Late afternoon. I finally turned it on. 10 missed calls. 7 from Michael. 3 from Trisha. No voicemails. Just missed calls, and 1 text. Michael, we need to talk. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I didn't reply. Around 5 p.m., I heard tires crunching in the driveway. I looked out the front window and saw Trisha's SUV. She stepped out alone. No coat. Just her gray sweater and a bag over her shoulder. She marched up to the porch like she had every right to be there. I opened the door before she could knock. Can we talk? She said, voice tight. I didn't move. About what? About this situation, she said, stepping forward. I didn't stop her, but I didn't invite her in either. She looked around. Look, we know the house is technically still in your name, but that's not what this is about. It's about trust, about what's fair. Fair? I repeated. Yes, she said, clearly frustrated. We've been handling maintenance, taxes, upkeep. I paid the taxes, I interrupted. You never did. She paused. That clearly wasn't what she expected. Well, we paid for a new water heater. You paid with my husband's account, I said. I saw the statements. She shifted her weight. Michael and I assumed the house would be part of our future. You assumed wrong. She exhaled, sharp and impatient. You're doing this out of spite. You're mad about Thanksgiving. Fine. I shouldn't have said what I said. But walking out and trying to punish us by hiding legal paperwork, that's not okay. I didn't hide anything, I said calmly. I protected it. Trisha stared at me. So you're just going to take the house back like we're squatters? It was never yours, I said. She looked around again. Michael said you went to Kramer, that you filed something. I didn't answer. She shook her head. You know what? Do what you want, but don't expect us to help anymore. Don't expect holidays, or visits, or, I don't, I said, cutting her off. She stood there, mouth open, like she was waiting for me to change my tone, to soften, to offer some kind of apology for defending myself. But I didn't. After a few seconds, she turned and walked back to her car. She didn't slam the door, but the way she peeled out of the driveway told me everything I needed to know. That night, I slept in the bedroom. I changed the sheets, dusted the dresser, and opened the window for fresh air. I placed the newly notarized documents in the fireproof lockbox under the bed. And then I turned off the lights and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I called a locksmith. It wasn't a dramatic decision. It was just practical. I hadn't changed the lock since Bill passed, and after Trisha's visit, it seemed like the right time. She hadn't come back inside the house, but her tone the night before made something clear. She still believed they had control. The locksmith arrived by noon. A quiet man named Henry, probably in his early 60s, with short gray hair and a wedding ring that he twisted on his finger when he was thinking. He didn't ask questions, just replaced the front door lock and gave me 2 new keys. You want me to do the back as well? He asked. Yes, I said. All of them. He nodded and went to work. By 1 p.m. the house was completely rekeyed. When he left, I stood at the door holding the 2 new keys in my hand. I didn't call Michael. I didn't feel the need to explain anything. I just placed 1 key in the drawer by the stove and put the other in my purse. Around 3 p.m. I went outside to collect the mail. Nothing important. Just a few ads and a utility bill. But as I walked back toward the door, a car turned slowly into the driveway. I didn't have to squint to recognize the dark blue sedan. Michael's. He parked but didn't get out right away. I stood on the porch. He eventually opened the driver's side door and stepped out with a folder under his arm. I need to talk, he said. His tone was clipped. Tired. I didn't invite him in. Out here's fine, I said. He hesitated, then walked over and stopped just below the steps. You changed the locks. I did. You didn't tell me. No, I didn't. He looked around. You're making this harder than it has to be. I stayed quiet. He opened the folder and pulled out a few sheets of paper. We spoke to an attorney, he said. There may still be ways for us to contest the trust. I looked at the papers. You're welcome to try. That's not what I want, he said. This isn't about fighting you. But this doesn't feel right, Mom. This house. Dad wanted it to be part of our family legacy. I stepped down 1 stair. Then you should have treated me like part of the family. He shifted his weight, eyes down. You know I work a lot. I don't always know what's going on day to day. I lived in your house for almost 9 months, Michael, I said. 9 months. And you never once asked how I was doing. Never sat down with me. Never checked in when your wife said I'd be eating alone on Thanksgiving. He raised his head. You don't think I've regretted that since you walked out? I think you regretted the consequences, I said, not the actions. He closed the folder. Trisha's upset. I know. She thinks you're doing this to punish her. I didn't respond. Michael rubbed the back of his neck. Look, maybe we didn't handle things well. Maybe we took you for granted. But this house, this was supposed to be our plan, our future. No, I said. It was my past. And now, it's mine again. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he nodded once and turned to leave. No folder left behind. No paperwork exchanged. Just quiet tension hanging in the cold air. He drove off slower than he arrived. That night, I called the utility companies. I asked for account access transfers. Some were already in my name, Others had been redirected to Michael months earlier without me noticing. I corrected that. It took 2 hours and 3 phone calls, but by the end of the night, I was listed as the sole account holder on everything related to the property: water, electricity, internet, gs.my house, my name. No more confusion. The next morning, I started cleaning the upstairs closet. Bill had kept boxes of old tax files and receipts. Most of it was outdated. I shredded what I didn't need and made a pile of what I wanted to keep, just in case. After lunch, I drove to the county recorder's office and requested certified copies of the house title. I asked them to add a notice of trust ownership. On record, the clerk didn't blink, just asked for ID and processed the request. I left with stamped documents in hand. That afternoon, I received a text from Trisha. Trisha, you've made your point. Don't take this out on Michael. He's trying. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it without replying. 3 days passed without another word from either of them. I went to the grocery store, refilled my prescriptions, visited Bill's plot at the cemetery, and picked up some paint samples from the hardware store. I had been putting off repainting the living room since before he passed. The beige was faded and patchy in places. I chose a light gray instead. On the 4th day, just after I finished taping the baseboards, I heard a knock on the front door, not the bell, an actual knock. When I opened it, there was a man standing there in business attire. Mid-30s, leather folder in hand. Mrs. Wilkins? He asked. Yes. My name is Thomas Bryant. I represent Mr. and Mrs. Wilkins, Michael and Trisha. I was asked to deliver a formal request for mediation regarding the property. I took the folder but didn't open it. Is that all? I asked. Yes, ma'am, he said. They're hoping to resolve things without legal conflict. I already resolved it, I said. He gave a polite nod. My number's in the packet if you wish to respond. I closed the door and carried the folder into the kitchen. I sat down, opened it, and skimmed the letter. It was carefully worded. Something about co-occupancy expectations and transitional rights of equity. All legal fluff. They were trying to sound reasonable while planting seeds for future claims. I called Mr. Kramer. He told me not to reply. He said, if they want mediation, they can file a formal petition through the court. Until then, you're not obligated to engage. I trusted him. He knew what he was doing. That night, I sat in the living room, now half painted, with a sandwich and a glass of water. The house was quiet. The new locks were in place. The documents were sealed. My name was protected. Michael and Trisha thought they could pressure me, that if they wrapped it in polite words and formal requests, I'd back down, but I had nothing left to lose, and I wasn't leaving again. After I received the mediation letter, I expected silence. But I was wrong. 4 days later, they came back. It was Saturday, around 10:30 in the morning. I was vacuuming the hallway when I saw their car pull up from the window, Michael in the driver's seat, Trisha beside him. They parked at the edge of the driveway, and this time they weren't alone. A small white rental truck followed right behind them. I turned off the vacuum and stood by the front door, watching through the peephole. Michael stepped out and walked to the back of the rental. Trisha had a clipboard in her hand and a tight ponytail. They weren't here to talk. They were here to collect. I waited for the knock. It came, firm and fast. 3 quick hits. When I opened the door, Michael gave a stiff nod. We're here to pick up our things. What things? I asked. Furniture, Trisha answered, stepping forward. The bedroom set upstairs, the sideboard in the dining room, the wine fridge, the patio set, and a few boxes we left in the garage. I didn't move. All of that was paid for by Bill or myself. Nothing here belongs to you. Michael frowned. We bought that bedroom set 2 years ago. Bill paid for it, I said. I have the receipt. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Trisha jumped in. The wine fridge is ours. We had it delivered during the summer. You had it delivered, I said, to my house, with my card. It's still on the July statement. We used it exclusively, she argued. It was never meant to stay. I never agreed to you bringing it in the first place. Michael sighed. Mom, can we not do this now? Let us take what's clearly ours, and we'll be gone in an hour. What you're asking for isn't yours, I said, but I'm not going to block you from taking personal belongings. Anything you purchased with your own funds, documents, clothes, electronics, you're free to retrieve. But the furniture stays. Trisha looked like she was about to explode. Michael stepped forward, trying to calm the situation. Let's just go inside and take a look. You can point out what you want us to leave. We won't touch anything else. No, I said. If you want to make a list and have your lawyer send it formally, you're welcome to do that. Until then, you're not coming inside. Michael stared at me, hard. We lived here for almost a year. And now you don't, I replied. You don't have access anymore. Trisha took a deep breath and pulled out her phone. Fine, I'm calling the police. You can, I said, but they'll tell you the same thing. This is a civil issue. The house is in my name. The locks were changed legally. If you want to fight for a wine fridge in court, be my guest. They didn't expect that. Michael looked down, defeated. Trisha's lips were pressed so tightly together they turned white. Finally, she said, "You've changed." "No," I said, "I just stopped allowing myself to be walked over." They stood there in silence for a moment. Then Michael turned to go. Trisha stayed put, looking at me like she still couldn't believe any of this was happening. "I hope you enjoy it," she said quietly. "Your empty house, your peace and quiet. I hope it keeps you warm when you're alone." I didn't answer. She joined Michael at the car. They got in. The rental truck backed out of the driveway. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just retreat. Later that day, I received an email from their attorney, a formal list of items they were claiming as theirs. Mr. Kramer and I reviewed it together. Most were shared-use items or things bought with household accounts. Nothing personal or irreplaceable. We responded with a brief note. Items will be retained unless legal ownership is clearly documented. Access to property remains restricted. No response came back. That weekend, I finished painting the living room. I moved furniture on my own, slowly, one chair at a time. I took my time, no rush. I was in no one's way anymore. On Sunday night, I sat on the couch with a small plate of cookies and a mug of tea. The house was quiet, not empty, quiet. I realized I hadn't heard Trisha's voice in 8 days. No footsteps upstairs, no passive-aggressive sighs in the kitchen, no demands, just stillness. And then, something unexpected happened. My doorbell rang. It was late, close to 9 p.m. I opened the door carefully. There, standing with both hands tucked inside her coat, was Emma, my granddaughter, Trisha and Michael's daughter, 17 years old. Quiet, always polite. She hadn't come to the house since the summer. When I left Michael's, I hadn't expected to see her again. "Hi Grandma," she said softly. "Hi sweetheart," I answered, stepping aside. "It's freezing. Come in." She walked in, looking around. "It smells like it used to." "It's cleaner now," I said. "No more wine fridge humming all day." She smiled faintly. We sat at the kitchen table, and I offered her hot cocoa. She accepted. We didn't talk for a while, just sat. When she finally spoke again, her voice was low. "They said you took everything." "I didn't. I didn't think you did." We sat in silence again. After a moment, she asked, "Can I come visit sometimes? Just to see you, not them." "You don't need permission for that," I said. "This door's open to you." She smiled, and for the first time in months, I felt something crack open again. Not pain, not grief, something closer to relief. When Emma left that night, I walked her to the porch and watched as she got into her friend's car. She waved, and I waved back. Michael and Trisha had lost control of the house, the keys, and the narrative. And now, slowly, they were starting to lose the one thing they never expected: the people who still saw through them. Emma started visiting on Saturdays. Sometimes she stayed for an hour, sometimes longer. She always texted first. I never asked questions. I didn't pry about what Michael and Trisha were saying at home or if they even knew she was here. If she brought it up, I listened. If she didn't, we just baked something or watched an old movie. She liked listening to stories about Bill. Stories Michael hadn't heard or had long forgotten. "I wish I'd known him better," she said one afternoon while helping me fold laundry. "He always seemed quiet at holidays, but you talk about him like he was funny." "He was," I said. "He just didn't like crowds." I didn't say it out loud, but Emma's visits became the best part of my week. Not because I was lonely, but because she came without obligation. She didn't come out of guilt, or because someone asked her to. She came because she wanted to. Meanwhile, Michael and Trisha fell silent. No more letters, no more emails, no more lawyers. Mr. Kramer told me they hadn't filed anything. Whatever heat they'd felt during the holidays had cooled. Maybe they'd accepted that they'd pushed too far. Or maybe they were just waiting for time to pass so they could try again later. I didn't care either way. 2 weeks after New Year's, I finally got around to the attic. It had been untouched since Bill's stroke. I climbed the narrow stairs, with a flashlight and a small notebook. I wanted to clear space, maybe turn it into something useful again. Most of what I found were old boxes, tax records, broken holiday decorations, some tools that hadn't been touched in a decade. But near the back, I found something I'd forgotten existed: a photo album I had put together in the early 2000s. It had birthdays, Thanksgivings, and camping trips, all before the house became a battlefield. Michael was in almost every picture, Trisha in a few, but what struck me most was how often I was not in them. I had taken the photos, arranged the decorations, cooked the food, and still, I wasn't in most of the memories. I was always holding the camera. I closed the album and placed it aside. I didn't feel sad, just clear. The next morning, I called a local contractor about getting quotes to redo the back porch. The boards were rotting. Bill had meant to fix it before the stroke, but we never got around to it. The contractor came on Thursday. He was respectful, took notes, and said the project would take 3 weeks. I agreed. I wanted the porch back. Not for entertaining, just for myself. That weekend, Emma came by again. She brought banana bread she made herself. "Can I show you something?" she asked after we had our tea. Of course. She pulled out her phone and showed me a digital flyer for a scholarship program, one focused on family caregivers who had helped aging relatives. "I want to write about you," she said. "Not just because of everything that happened, but because you stayed standing." I didn't know what to say at first. "You don't have to win an argument to win a life," she said. "I see that now." It was the first time I'd heard someone in that family really understand. "Do your best," I said. "Tell it however you need to." The following Monday, a certified letter arrived from Michael. No threats, no legal jargon this time. Just a plain letter of, "Mom, I know we went too far. We didn't handle things right. I don't expect you to forgive us, but I want you to know I've been thinking a lot about everything. Trisha and I are in counseling. I don't know what that means for the future, but I'm trying to change. Emma told me she visits you. I'm glad. I hope you're okay." McKelly didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. It was just a letter, but it felt like the first thing in a long time that didn't come with strings. I didn't write back. Not right away. Maybe one day I would. But right now, I wasn't interested in fixing what they'd broken. I was too busy fixing what they had left behind. 3 weeks later, the porch was finished. Clean wood, new rails, freshly painted. I sat there with a blanket over my legs and a cup of tea in my hands. The wind was sharp, but the sun was out. Emma was due to arrive soon. We were going to organize some of Bill's old books and maybe donate the ones I no longer needed. I hadn't touched that shelf in years. I looked out over the yard. The trees were bare, but the ground was firm, stable. The house stood solid around me, quiet and whole again. Michael and Trisha had spent nearly a year trying to erase me quietly, from the kitchen, from the dinner table, from the decisions. They never yelled. They never called names. They just excluded me in slow, careful steps, until I wasn't supposed to exist anymore. But they underestimated something. I had been here before them. I had built this house with Bill, brick by brick, year by year. They didn't give it to me, and they couldn't take it from me. Not without a fight. And certainly not anymore. The life they built without me didn't survive because it wasn't rooted in truth. It was built on assumption and control. I didn't take revenge. I didn't shout. I just took back what was mine. And for the first time in years, that was enough.